Yeah, you had
Well, I
something
was
else
just going to
before? Yeah.
prompt you. So I was expecting a wipeout. I mean, I kind of got what I expected about out of the Beto thing, and a wipeout on the border. Did that come to pass?
So there were three seats in particular in South Texas, and in fact, Cale a couple of years back. Matt didn't want to hear my answer to that, but a couple of years back,
I'll hang
we
up and take my question out there.
yeah. A couple years back, I don't know if you remember, Cale, after the 2020 elections, we did a little video on what's happening in South Texas because there's been a lot of really worrying warning signs there, particularly because the Democratic Party has refused, especially on the national level, like statewide in Texas, like this is not to absolve them of blame for this stuff. It just is a complete disaster from the county to the state level everywhere. There's been a real lack of interest from the national party to invest in South Texas, which has allowed the Republican Party to start, getting more and more support there. Not necessarily in the way that's like those districts are all flipping to a Trump, for example, but in a way that more people there are voting for Trump than you would ever expect to be voting for a person like Donald Trump. So the GOP in Texas has really been focusing on South Texas, and there's been a lot of narrative going into this about these three South Texas races. And in the three that were really being covered, and there's a lot of media about, the Democrats were successful in two of the three. The unfortunate thing, right, is that the races that we're talking about for our side, people who consider themselves to be democratic socialists or progressives. Um, so Henry Cuellar wins. Vincetti Gonzalez, who's another fairly conservative Democrat, not as conservative as Cuellar, but more of that kind of like we need to run more moderate candidates in that part of the country, won. And Michelle Viejo lost to Monica De La Cruz, which, in fairness, that was a district that was gerrymandered to sort of create an opening for the right wing. But it's also like you shouldn't be losing races in South Texas as the Democratic Party. So prevented like the big negative story. But I don't think it's something that I don't think we should be feeling too confident, because the fact that these were even like close and we were even worried about them, I think really does sort of signal some worrying signs about where politics are going in this state. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but in Texas, Latinos are now the largest group in the state. They are the largest group in the state of Texas. So there's been all this hope for years. I remember when I was young hearing people talk about this, 15, 20 years. I'm talking about like 2000, 15, 20 years, Texas is going to be solidly blue because white people are going to be marginalized as a voting bloc, and Democrats are going to be able to win across the board. And we're not seeing that yet. Now, like across the board, like Latinos tend to vote more Democratic, but it's not this kind of overwhelming win that I think a lot of people who live in DC expect it to be. And before we like expand a little bit, because I definitely want to talk about the Beto thing a little bit more in depth. What is worrying to me is the fact that, as I said earlier, there's like Cuellar wins, Vincetti Gonzalez wins, and then the argument is we just need conservative Democrats to make sure that we don't lose races. Michelle Viejo had been pleading with the Democratic Party to just put a little bit of money into that race, to do some ad buys, to do some billboards, because the Republican Party on the state and the national level are swarming South Texas right now. They're investing all of their money in trying to flip this area. And it just goes into something that I think the reason these are vulnerable in the first place is a lot of voters in South Texas, regardless of their race, feel like they aren't appreciated by the Democratic Party. A lot of people feel like they've been ignored for a long time. And to do that to Viejo is really frustrating, especially because obviously, she was more on the progressive side. She was somebody who was pro-abortion and things like that. And I think I don't want to speculate too much, but I think there was a tactical decision by the National Democratic Party to make the argument that they want to make, to sort of refuse to invest at all in that race.
I mean, I'm not shocked to hear that. The theme of the Democratic Party is prevent defense, not to use another sports metaphor, and it's been that way for my entire lifetime. And a lot of what that entails is not just like a messaging failure where they don't verge on like more populist talk until the 11th hour, until their hand is forced. but the it also includes a kind of operating strategy of protecting incumbents at all costs, which is maintaining a lead as opposed to going for it or trying to get a more comfortable lead, taking some risks on that front. And they find that to be usually incumbents tend to be, based on the construction of the Democratic Party, more conservative. But when that isn't the case, we know which way they break, and it's always with the more conservative candidate.
I want to bring this up just for some fun shit for a second, because there's sorry, I'm trying to be light, but like I'm very frustrated about what happened here last night, because I'm stoked. Mayra Flores, if people don't know who that is, very, very far right kind of Trumpist candidate, lost. But just to remind folks, the Democratic Party did a kind of Pied Piper thing with her initially, letting her win so that she could present herself as, so that she could expose herself as like the crazy lady that she is, and the Democrats could win. Now, I will give them their credit. They won. They didn't lose the seat here. But I find it to be an extremely dangerous game for the fucking Democratic Party to be playing. We remember, for example, their position towards Trump during the primary. But this was what she tweeted out after the results last night. The red wave did not happen. Republicans and independents stayed home. Do not complain about the results if you did not do your part. And just for my folks who might not be familiar with the political geography of the state, that's Elon Musk's friend. Elon Musk publicly came out and claimed that he voted for her. So we should remember that too. I don't think we have to, explain to our audience how awful Elon Musk is, but that's when he's talking, when he was tweeting out the other day about how we need balance in Congress. Yeah, that's the balance that he wants to see there.
Well, I'm sure he'll be voting for the Democrat running in that House district if the Republicans take back the House next time around.
I'm sure he voted for Beto, right? Because Texas has been so dominated.
You've got to split your ticket.
I'm actually independent, but
that's what the founders wanted.
So watch this, though.
Gorka.
I think most people know this, but it was a disaster here in Texas for the Texas Democratic Party, I would argue. This is their kind of cheeky response to the results last night. New header photo just dropped. I wonder what it's going to be. Maybe a sweet picture of Beto holding people and thanking them.
Cuellar? Oh, God.
They have the Mayra Flores tweet as their thing, which I can't tell y'all, if you don't know about what the Texas Democratic Party is like, a better encapsulation of what they're like is to continue their losing streak. They have not won a statewide election in Texas since 1994. I had 2 years of my life under Ann Richards, and that's been it, right? And they have a horrible night last night, and they're over here gloating because the crazy, I should be nice about my words, but the person who is an election denier, far right Trumpist, lost a seat that she should never have been in the running for in the first place. That's where their mentality is.
Right. Well, this is for them. This is finally their strategy coming to fruition of we can win against the Republicans because they're actually extremist crazies. Like they're the most insane, crazy people possible. And that is what the argument has been for a very long time, and it usually doesn't pan out. And to the extent that it did pan out last night, it's like they still lost.
Well, it's what's the narrative last night? The narrative is that they didn't lose that is like the blue wall. You know what I mean? Like that is a part of Texas that's blue every time. They didn't lose their like base, and they're celebrating because of that. I mean, that's really wild to me.
No, that's like bumping the difficulty on Madden down to rookie and being like, look, close game, huh? Pretty important.
I mean, the Florida and Texas Democratic Party should probably just log off of Twitter for the next week. But there needs to be some sort of kind of reckoning with these social media interns. They're in way too deep, and this extends to like sports teams and stuff like that. Like too much memification of this kind of crap. It's so artificial.
So I want to spend a little bit of time on the Beto stuff with y'all, because I might be filling some of the blanks here, but here are the final results. In the national profile, a lot of people thought this was going to be really close. A lot of people thought it was going to be close or better than this, at least. But if if you're looking here, I mean, Greg Abbott won 54% of the vote. Now, before I get to this next slide here, I just want to remind folks, Beto has national media profile, a pretty sizable like grassroots organization behind him, right? For better, for worse. And he broke fundraising records in Texas. So you can't make the argument that's typically made. It's like we weren't able to raise enough money to beat like the Republican machine. This is 2022. This is the race that just finished yesterday, right? And y'all don't even know who this person is, I reckon. But in 2018, Abbott won another election against somebody named Lupe Valdez, who got 42.5% of the vote with no national profile, without having $77 million fundraised to Beto. I'll just put that up again for folks if you didn't see. Beto 43 versus Abbott's 54. And it's just, I want to pick my words carefully here because, like, despite what some people accuse me of online, like, I'm not a Democrat. Like, my heart doesn't flutter with the rise and success of, political figures like Beto. But as somebody who lives here, somebody with my family's here, I care a lot about what happens here. And you're seeing the destruction of my home state. It's becoming more and more unaffordable. Abortion is banned in the state. You're seeing school children be murdered brutally with no repercussions from the state when it comes to the complete failure of our security apparatus here. Like, it's extremely worrying to see somebody be able to raise this much money, get the excitement that he has, and just lose across the board. Now, I will say that, like, it makes a point, not to be too self-serving, it makes a point that I've been making for a long time. The Texas Democratic Party have had two strategies for winning. One, the Republicans are so nuts that eventually people are going to show up and they're going to vote them out, right? And there's truth to this. Like, it's wild. If you look at like the policies on the books in Texas right now, and you look at public polling, something like 15% of Texans support the total abortion ban, right? This is not a popular position. Guns, it's a little bit, closer, but open carry, which we have, you don't have to have a permit to be able to carry around a gun around the state. Extremely unpopular, not only with Texans across the board. Majority of Texans oppose it. The police oppose it for obvious reasons, because it makes it very hard for them to do their job, right? The point here being that, like, it doesn't matter how bad it gets. You have to run on something that's going to motivate people. And the second failure has been this kind of demographics is destiny thing, where it's like, if Texas stops being a majority white state, then the politics are going to change, which is wrongheaded on a lot of reasons. One, there's a big difference between maybe not liking people in office and voting for somebody else. Two, there's this kind of monolithic understanding of people where it's just like, in Texas, not trying to make it sound like a utopia or anything like that, but like, we're neighbors. We like go to the same football games on Friday. We live next to each other. And why is it surprising that people who work in the same place, live in the same communities, can sometimes be enticed by the right wing? You're seeing that happen, where the right wing is able to sort of, pick up votes with people who maybe folks in DC don't think are ever going to vote Republican, but in practice in Texas are. So it's one of these things, like, they're waiting for Godot, to use a literary reference, right? They're waiting for this gift to be given to them that is just not happening. And it doesn't matter how much money they raise, it seems. It doesn't matter how much national profile they get. This political movement, the Democratic Party here, is just losers across the board.
Yeah. I mean, just two comments, maybe. The first, just on the demographics is destiny. I mean, this is like just a germane point, but race does not predict anything about your politics, not a single thing. And like, all of when you see like racial, when they break down the exit polling of, this race or this category of people voted this percentage, it's largely actually just geography. It's not, there's nothing about race, because it's a fake category. So there's nothing about race that actually imparts like politics to anyone. It's about where you live, who you live around, what is your situation, your neighborhood, the associations you're in, whether you're in a union or not, the status of your work laws, etc. Like, it's the geography. But regardless, I mean, I think with like Texas, I mean, we were talking about this before, David. What did Beto run on? What was Beto's like pitch about inflation? What did Beto have to say about cost of living? Like, these are the issues that were dominating leading into this election. And I think, again, what we started off saying about the difference between opinion polling and exit polling, you probably could have gotten a lot more people to actually turn out if you dealt with the issues that were relevant in the opinion polling, that again, Democrats got saved because of this, the situation with abortion, because of just kind of the absurdity and like the actual ridiculousness and kind of extremism of the right. Like, but they still lost because they had nothing to say on cost of living, on inflation. Like, and you don't have to go Bernie Sanders. I mean, you should go Bernie Sanders, but like they can't even meet us halfway on this.
Yeah, I mean, from the outside, go on, Matt. Yeah,
I was just gonna say, like, do you feel like? I feel like the centrists look caught though. Like, there's a lot of recrimination about, like, New York, for instance, that, hey, can we shut up about these cities being in like crime infested hellholes? Because that's actually just helping Republicans win upstate. Like, and you see the strength of all like the sort of progressive left, like this feels, and I haven't been around that long. I'm about to turn 34. But it feels like the first election I've been like, you can't really blame the left for this sort of loss. Like, it seems like there's the narrative is set that, hey, can we like relax on buying into every head fake that Republicans throw our way? I mean, look at Florida too. Florida, sorry, Emma, I'll let you go in a second. But Florida,
no, it's okay.
I mean, Christ, a fucking Republican independent guy, and then Val Deming's like flashing her badge, like, Go ahead,
and Herschel Walker flashing his, but to your point though, Matt, about the Democrats being unable to blame like the left this time. For the most part, that's true. But I literally just saw, I know you guys like the American Prestige podcast, and you introduced it to me, Matt. Derek Davison said he just turned on MSNBC, and Claire McCaskill was railing about how socialism
a loser if you've never seen one. Like, it's just sorry for people who don't know. Like,
loser. Yeah. And so they're a one-trick pony. No return to it. But like, to your point, I don't think that it has the same salience right now in this like vacuum of democratic ideas, and in this opportunity where Republicans are so associated with Trump that they can't escape the brand, rightfully so. Democrats should be trying to put their foot on the gas, right? Like, this is when you see a weakness in your opponent, you take everything that you can. You take advantage of it. And I do have fears that they're kind of just, we're going to focus test MAGA trickle down on the national level. We'll retread the same candidates like Beto O'Rourke or Charlie Crist, like, who are now just professional losers at this point. And then Abrams with the added baggage. I wonder if there's some crossover that you can kind of compare, maybe how the well-knownness of Abrams and O'Rourke might have hurt them because a narrative has been constructed against them. But yeah, what's your take on that, actually, David?
No, I mean, like, well, what's really wild to me, because what was really wild to me, like, in the election, like, the ads that you were getting from Abbott were like telling his life story, like, about how he got injured when he was young and he never let it hold him down. And it's like, this guy has been governor of Texas for 8 years. It's sort of like ridiculous for him to be doing like, I'm Greg Abbott, welcome.
Get to know me ads.
Get to know me. But you realize a lot of people have moved in the state in recent years. And I also think that's another Democratic mistake, where they think that all the people who have moved here are just California liberals. Unfortunately, I will admit, I do not like these people when I meet them. I talk to people all the time who I think are the biggest freaks in the world, because they'll say, like, I moved to Texas because I like Greg Abbott and what he did on COVID-19 or something like that, which is psycho. But like, there's no doubt about it that, like, the idea that everyone coming here is somehow like a big liberal trying to flip the state is wrong. I think there's a decent amount of them, particularly people who are moving to like Austin and the big cities and stuff. But like, when you look at the influx of people, I think it's wrong to just assume that they're all people who want to vote for the Democratic party. But like, yeah, no, I mean, the thing is about Beto going into the election, right? Just to be kind of neutral on this, is that everyone had their mind made up about Beto because he is a national figure at this point. Yeah. In a way, even locally in Texas, that Abbott is not, which seems sort of crazy to say, but I think Abbott had a bit of an advantage being able to define himself for people. But I want to make sure we get to these other things. So I just have one more thing to bring up about Texas, because it matters. I think it matters for us across the board as we're trying to build up our form of democratic socialist politics in this country. Because it was a big part of the Bernie Sanders campaign, for example, which is we're going to get people who don't typically show up and vote to come out and vote for us. And I always make this point about Bernie that I think that primaries are a very bad way to test that strategy, just because when it is in most states, it's very hard for people to vote in primaries. They're complicated. It's not, as simple as showing up to a general election. But that was a Bernie Sanders strategy. I think it's something that people on our side definitely should be trying to build. That's what I want to see. But another one of these kind of mythologies, along with the demographics is destiny, along with, all these other things, is that Texas isn't a red state, quote unquote. It's a non-voting state. And if you just get higher voter turnout, then you're going to win. And I think there's, truth to that, in the sense that, like, I think Beto would have been done better if the turnout was higher than it was. But there was a really interesting piece in Texas Monthly by Ben Rowan called "Sorry Democrats, Texas Isn't a Secretly Blue State." And I won't go through the whole thing. But one, I think it's really important to note that despite what you might think, the Republicans are very willing to play this game too, and they've been doing get out the vote stuff with non-voters, and also find that a lot of the Texas State Democratic Party, which isn't surprising knowing how horrible they are, their voter data is bad, which is like a very funny point, but it's really off. But more importantly, he goes and he interviewed some of these voters, non-voters, and different kind of politics. Think to say these people are not. I mean, liberals in the word I would use, so maybe it works. But like, some people are like pro-gun rights or things like that, and they're saying that they're they can't be, they won't vote liberal or whatever. But like, here's what some of the people who don't vote in Texas were saying to him. And I think this is a very important thing to know. So one person, Mario, who's 27 years old, voted for Obama and is in fact very knowledgeable, talked about some of the like Dodd-Frank and financial regulations that they want to see. But they're not going to vote in this election. Quote, "I just believe that none of the candidates offer anything and actually go through with it." Another person said there's been no real change. They voted for Democrats their whole life, and they don't know where the money's been going, which, again, you see the failure of governance there. This one is an interesting one, because this is where they say that these voters are maybe right-wing. But I think that we could definitely win these people with like a pro-worker, left-wing, Bernie Sanders-style movement. Tim, a compressor operator in Pecos, told me that Democrats have a lot of good stances that are good for the general public. Corporate taxes, unionization, in a kind of backwards way, race issues. But O'Rourke had lost him. The whole take your gun thing is just too intense. So like, when you talk to voters, and I think there's parts of these that are unique to Texas, but I think it's across the board. It's not that they don't care about issues. They are pessimistic. They're depressed. They think that politics is not something that's viable. It's not something that's worth spending their time on, because if the guy who they might like wins, it's not going to improve their life. And I think this, more than anything, right, this is like a failure of the Democratic Party, but I also think it's a real challenge for us in our movements to overcome this kind of, feeling of abandonment that a lot of people have with engaging in politics, because we can go there and we can say we want a just transition. We can have all the policies right. We can go there and we say we want higher minimum wage, etc. But a lot of people just do not believe that showing up and voting is going to change their life for the better. And like, that's been one of the things that's scariest for me, I think, trying to move forward, is that like, we have like the kind of prototypical, like I can imagine them right now, like the perfect Texas labor candidate. And it's just like, I don't think that that's going to be enough on its own. It has to really start somewhere different in people's communities that can motivate people to show up.